Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session. I'm Camille Music, Director of Marketing at Infovity, and we're hoping today's presentation on improving life sciences, financial planning and analysis will help you with the tools to streamline processes, improve reporting and analytics, and especially enhance controls and compliance. Today's presenter is Kanappan Singaram. He is the EPM Practice Director at Infovity. And Kanappan has over 15 years of experience implementing enterprise performance management tools, business intelligence, and ERP financials. And he was also a consultant at Oracle for mid-market. And we attribute his success to thinking strategically in every engagement. So he's our go-to guy. If you have any questions during the presentation, submit them in the Zoom panel and we'll address them anonymously during Q&A at the end. And I also want to remind you that we will email the webinar recording to everyone. In that email, we're going to provide you with a survey to share your feedback on the presentation and to let us know what other topics would be beneficial for you, especially over the next 1 to 3 months. And for your feedback, we'll send a special thank you in the mail, so make sure to fill that out. In May, we're hosting more webinars, including how to create accurate and timely budgets to improve manufacturing and procurement processes and enable companies to achieve top-line revenue and profit growth. So let us know if you're interested in attending that or to share with your colleagues, or just follow us on LinkedIn and you'll be able to access that registration page. And the last thing I want to address before I hand the call off is our goal at this time is really to educate and support. So no ask is too big. Our resources are known for being an extension of your team, increasing efficiency, solving productivity problems, all built to meet your budget and timelines, which is key right now. So with that, I will hand it off to Kanappan.
Thank you, Camille. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
Okay, perfect. Very much appreciated, Camille. Thank you for setting this up and organizing the event. And I welcome you all. And I welcome you all to this presentation. Thank you, everyone, for taking your time to participate in today's webinar. And the focus of today's webinar is to essentially, talk about how the planning and budgeting process in a life science company can be improved upon. The CFOs and the director of finance whom I speak to, they always rely on Excel spreadsheets to input their budget, collect the budget, consolidate the budget. And so today, our focus is going to be primarily on how we can help you to move away from Excel spreadsheet and then put a world-class system in place to improve your planning and budgeting process. And towards that, I'm going to talk to you about what we have done in the past with a variety of our life science customers. And then we will also talk about what typically keeps a CFO awake at night with any of the biotech companies, and how Oracle EPM solution can address those challenges and its value proposition to your company, right? And then we will also talk about the Jumpstart package or the framework that we bring to the market along with Oracle EPM, how that is going to help you implement a planning budgeting solution successfully with all the best practices. And I'm going to spend about next to 7 minutes in this PowerPoint presentation, and then I will jump into the live demonstration where I'm going to show you the typical, the P&L planning activity associated with, revenue planning, clinical trial planning, and then all the other operating expenses. We'll take a look at that. Now, let's talk about, some of our customers, how, we have helped the customers that are, sample customers that you see here in this slide. They're all in the market, either doing advanced stages of clinical trial or already products in the market. right? For example, Nectar Therapeutic, they, prior to implementing Oracle planning budgeting solution, they were using Excel spreadsheets. They would go about having gap-based budget prepared in a series of Excel workbook, and then they will have another series of Excel workbook to prepare a cash-based budget. And this would take them about nearly 5 months to complete and get it approved by the board, right? And this is where Oracle Planning Budgeting Solution helped them to cut down their budgeting cycle time and provide one single repository for them to prepare the gap as well as the cash-based budget and move away from Excel spreadsheet and realize significant saving. I'm talking about 60 to 70% time saving by putting a solution in place to accomplish the planning and budgeting process. Another vendor, another life science company, Cytokinetics, they are particularly interested in controlling the outside spend and gain visibility to all the R&D expenses. And for that purpose, they wanted to track every single PO and be able to budget at the purchase order level and at the vendor level so they can do the actual versus budget analysis in the tool. Prior to implementing Oracle Planning Budgeting solution, Cytokinetics used to do this in Excel spreadsheet, and their users would spend a lot of time collecting data, trying to figure out what is the variance in Excel spreadsheet, and pretty much spend a lot of time collecting data. And they were able to now perform actual versus budget analysis and have better control over the spend. Once again, this is another successful customer in terms of our customers who are able to have greater visibility to the R&D spend and improve their processes. Now, think about a scenario where, a pandemic like a scenario where we need to be absolutely agile on how we are aligning with the market and be able to respond to the market conditions. And you need a solution like Oracle Planning Budgeting Solution and Infovity's packaged content that will allow you to move away from a rigid, time-consuming, error-prone Excel spreadsheet. And that is what our customers have done. And the Oracle EPM solution works with ERP, variety of ERP like Oracle ERP, such as your eBusiness Suite, Oracle Financials Cloud, PeopleSoft, JD Edwards, SAP, Infor, Microsoft. So it can connect with all these different sources. In fact, actually, it can connect with, for example, your system like R&D Logic, where you are capturing time of your employees, and you can actually extract that information from there and perform very efficient allocations, right? So that's what actually we bring to the table. And let's talk about some of the key issues that keeps the CFO at the night, right? Awake at night. One thing that you want to immediately is having the better visibility to clinical research cost. And that's one of the biggest cost component for a life science company that is engaged in a 5-year clinical trial process, 3-year, 5-year clinical trial process, right? To get the drug approved by FDA and get it out to the market, that's a long, and you need to have all the resources aligned to be very efficient and effective in conducting your business. And that is exactly what keeps the CFO awake at night. And the other thing is ensuring compliance and making sure that you have all the financial priorities lined up so you can be very effective when you go to market in terms of marketing and commercializing your product. Right? So those are some of the key things, and you need a system that is very quick enough and fast enough, accurate enough, and you cannot scale with Excel spreadsheet, right? And that's what Oracle Planning Budgeting Solution, Oracle EPM, Enterprise Performance Management, suite of applications allows you to do. And in order to be effective, you not only have to align your 5-year plan, but also you have to align your quarterly forecast or your rolling forecast, right? And it needs to be very seamless in terms of on a 5-year time horizon or a 1-year time horizon to an 18 months time horizon. Right? You need to be able to do that. And let's say, for example, you want to account for inflation in your annual plan, and you want to reflect that in your 5-year strategic plan. It needs to be talking together. You cannot have, Excel workbooks are sitting there and doing all these different activities, creating silos of information. And that's exactly what Oracle Planning Solution allows you by giving you a single repository, right? That will help you to strategically, plan and then do your bottom up as well as top down, and at the same time achieve your rolling forecast. So you can do your, as we go into this, you'll see how you can do your revenue planning and clinical trial planning. And that's essentially the key value of Oracle Solution. And this is some of the numbers here in terms of, how our customers are realizing values, right? Those who are using Oracle Planning Solution, now they are spending more time on analyzing the data, which will allow you to make effective decisions. Right? And companies are able to reduce the time it takes to complete the monthly forecasting. I mean, imagine a situation where, you close your books on day 4 and then you get your forecasting revised on day 8. Would that not be an ideal scenario to control and be effective in your business? And that's exactly what Oracle Planning Budgeting Solution is going to do for you. Right, and with that, let's talk about when you have an enterprise solution like Oracle Planning Budgeting, you need a framework so you don't spend a lot of time implementing. Right, you want to let's say your budgeting cycle starts in August. You want to be able to, put a solution in place between now and August so you can actually, have your new budgeting cycle done in a solution like this. And that's what we do by bringing this prepackaged content, right? We allow you to have the modeling capability around your clinical trial in terms of your patient enrollment. And then we have the ability to give you the revenue planning in terms of your milestone revenue, collaboration revenue, and be able to model all these and from an operating expense point of view, go to the vendor level and get that information quickly. That's what Infovity Jumpstart framework allows you to do. And with that, you can set up dashboards like this where you can compare actual versus budget in terms of your revenue as well as your clinical trial cost, right? And so if you think about this, as I was mentioning, one of the benefit of our prepackaged content is we bring the best practices. We know the key drivers for a life science company, right? We know what drivers are important for you. So our ability to roll out a solution with the Oracle Planning Budgeting Solution is going to allow you to have the system ready come August, so you can move away from Excel spreadsheet to the planning budgeting solution. Right? So with that, I'm going to go into the demonstration, and in the demonstration, we're going to talk about the key things, right? If you go back, I was mentioning your ability to spend more time on analyzing the information rather than collecting the data, right? So I'm going to show you first how you can achieve efficiency in your month-end actual versus budget reporting. Right? Because planning doesn't just stop with the planning, right? You want to be able to perform efficiently the actual versus budget analysis and determine whether you need to, what do you need to do to control the actual spend so it stays within the forecast or within the budget. So we'll talk about that, right? And then I will show you how you can use the planning budgeting system to plan for your clinical cost, R&D cost, and G&A cost. Right? And then I'll also show you how to use the system to do your revenue budget. right? And last but not the least, the workforce planning and how can you allocate all these expenses and get these overall budget consolidated and get it approved by your board. That's what I'm going to show you in the next 25 minutes, okay? So with that, let's go into the system now. And there we go. Just going to close this couple of windows so you can see my screen. So what you're seeing now is the Oracle Planning Budgeting Cloud System. And I'm going to show you a model that will basically allow you to budget at the level of detail that you need. And let's start with how you can do your actual versus budget analysis, right? I'm going to go into these reports, and this solution allows you to define a pre-canned reports, and I will show you some examples of how you can use this system in your environment, right? So I'm just going to, let's take a look at some of these reports here. And these are more like canned reports. And let's say you close your books on day 5, and then day 6, you want to get these reports published to your stakeholders, right? So you can very easily do that using the planning system. And let's just go ahead and run the application, run this report. And it's going to ask for some parameters. And we're just going to take that, and let's go into this. Right? So this, the report as it comes up, you will see it is going to basically give you all the key information in terms of, let's give it a second here for it to come up. Yep. So what you see here in the screen now is the monthly report that every single month your finance team needs to get visibility to, right? Let's spend a couple of minutes on this report now. So what you see here is a comparison of a mid-year forecast with actual, right? And it shows obviously your variances, and then it shows you from a quarter-to-date point of view, year-to-date point of view, and also it shows how much is the remaining. Right? That's very important. You need to get to an understanding of how much budget I have left over for the remaining period of time, so I can manage. You know, if there is some PO that I need to cut down, then I can take a decision based on that. It all depends on how easily and quickly you can get visibility to the remaining budget that you have, right? So this report allows you to do that. And if you kind of see here on top of this, you are organizing this information from a high level to a detail, right, in this one single report. And one of that is you have what we call as cash and non-cash, right, in terms of your actual versus forecast. And then you are looking at all these expenses into 3 primary buckets, right? What are going to be my outside spend? You know, all your, your spends with all your vendors and purchase orders, and what is going to be my outside spend? And how much am I spending on my FTE, right? And how much am I spending on my consultants? You know, these are 3 big buckets that you want to gain visibility to. And then it goes into the detail at the total company level, right? It goes into the detail at the total company level. And the top section, the gray section, shows you the FTE, and then the white background shows you the outside spend, and the blue background shows you the consultant related expenses, which are going to be a key thing for you at the total company level. And then you can go down further to see for each department, right? So this is one single report that can be generated. And when you are sending it to each of the department, you can burst this report into each department. And then, you know, each department would get that information in the form of a PDF file, right? The same information can be downloaded into Excel, and this is a live report. The same report that you saw over the browser, you can have it actually downloaded into Excel and then have it refreshed every single month. Once the period close is done, you just open the Excel workbook and you hit on refresh, the system is going to pretty much, refresh the data. So these are all not a static information, dynamic information. You can connect to the underlying repository and refresh the report in Excel workbook itself. Right? So this is an example of how you can actually perform actual versus budget analysis through a standard report and get more visibility. In fact, you can drill down onto each of these accounts and go to, I'll show you in a little bit how you can do vendor level, purchase order level analysis, comparing the actual versus budget. And so this is an example of a report that you can set up, right? Let me show you another report, and then, so here is an example of a P&L report, right? Let's just take a look at that very quickly. And again, same idea, and I'm just going to select the default parameter. And this is an example of another report. And let me just, so if you see here, obviously you are looking at, R&D, G&A, and your commercialization. And at the end of the day, you need to get your net income. And the good news here is, as you build this budget, right now I'm still showing you the reporting, but when you build your annual budget and the monthly forecast, the information, you might be doing it on an accrual basis, on a GAAP basis, and then you can, on top of it, create all the adjustments that you need for your cash-based budgeting. That's how one of our customers was able to, like I was mentioning initially in the slide presentation, they were able to actually use the system to do GAAP-based and then create adjustments on top of that to get to the cash-based budget and cut down the time it takes for them, right? So this is an example of that. And now let me go back to the presentation here, and let us also talk about how you can do analysis, right? Every single time, tell me a day when your CFO is not calling you and asking you, can you give me more information associated with this particular project, with this particular vendor? I need to get some details. So what you have to do is you probably are going and running a report in your ERP system, downloading that into Excel, and then formatting it. And by the time you get that information back to your CFO, it might be a day or two. Right? Whereas with our planning budgeting solution, you have the ability to query the underlying repository from Excel, and because all the actuals, whether it is JD Edwards or R&D Logic or Microsoft Dynamics, you can have these processes defined in the planning system and have that automatically brought over on a scheduled basis multiple times a day, right, into the planning system. So you're not thinking about gathering the data, right? Because the data is already gathered for you in the planning system in terms of all the actuals, right? So now what you can do is you can go into the planning system and then say, you know what, I would like to go ahead and perform more of analysis, right? And what you see here in the screen is an example of that. And so this is your company, right? Your point of view. And for this specific department, you are interested in analyzing these key expenditures, right? And this is something that you created. And let's say I hit refresh, the system is going to refresh the information and it is going to give me my year total, and I can double click on my year total. Then I would know what is my quarterly spend. And let's say I want to concentrate on outside services and drill down on that and look at my various projects, right? So I can very easily do that. If I just go to planning, I can just say keep only, and now I am looking at my outside services, right? I can double click on my all project, then it is going to show me all the projects that I am running. And for, let's say, for example, for this project, for this clinical trial project, I want to focus my analysis. I'll just say keep only, and then I can double click on all the vendors. Now it is going to show me the expenditure associated with all my vendors here, right? Of course, I can be smart in terms of just, saying, I don't want to look at all my data with this. I can just do my settings here, and do a quick refresh, and it's going to show me, these are all my different vendors, and now I can go and drill down on all POs, and now it is going to show all my purchase orders as well. And if I drill down further on my month, I can see my monthly distribution, which means I can compare actual versus budget at the purchase order level, right? So if you were to do this planning at the purchase order level or at the vendor level, you will have to first download this information into Excel and then work with another Excel workbook so you can input this information, consolidate, and all of that is going to take time. Whereas with this type of analysis, I can slice and dice, drill down, and get to the individual PO and perform my analysis much more quicker and faster. So right, with that, let's just go in and go to the next section of the demo, where I'm going to show you how you can, you saw how you can analyze information. You also saw how you can make use of the standard reports to publish the actual versus budget analysis to all the departments, right? Now let's talk about how you can input the budget, have a collaborative environment for various departments to get into the system, input the budget, and have the system automatically consolidate for you. You're not talking about collecting the spreadsheet and then you're summarizing it and then you're taking it to the board and then the board says, no, cut down the expenses by another 5%. What you're going to do, then you need to go back to all the users and then get that Excel thing done and then get it back, consolidate. You don't have to do all of that, right? It's a centralized repository, and as and when the budget owners input the budget during the budget window, this is getting consolidated, aggregated in real time. So let's talk about, let's see how you can use the system to perform that, right? So let me just close this and I'll just go back up here. And so let's go and take a look at, for example, one of these expenses, right? So this is where you see different kinds of models. And let's go to the clinical trial model and see how you can use this. It's very flexible, right? Based on my experience working with a number of biotech companies, I see the drivers. At the end of the day, you need to get your clinical trial cost budgeted, but then your drivers could be slightly different, and the planning budgeting solution gives you that flexibility to define all the drivers and calculations. So here's an example of different components of your clinical trial cost, right? What are some of the upfront fee? And there could be some milestone payments that you have to do depending on, your clinical trials could be done on a collaborative fashion, and there could be some milestone payments that you have to do, or you might be even receiving milestone payments from another collaborator, right? Which is going to get into your revenue. But in this case, it could even get into your expenses because there could be some milestones that you are achieving. Your vendor is achieving, so you might have to pay them. So you might have to budget for that, right? So here again, milestone payment and some of the clinical trials in terms of, recruiting patients, and maybe, you're paying a stipend to your patients participating in the clinical trial. And some cost could be, you might have actually, so it's basically multiple layers of clinical trials, right? It could be something that you're going to you could be passing to your partner, right? So you need to basically budget for all of that. And this template allows you to budget that, right? So this upfront fee that you are incurring, and you need to budget that between this start and end period, and you specify that the system is going to put that information across all these white cells and get that budgeting done, right? And so this is an example of clinical trial. And similarly, you can take a look at, for example, commercial budget, right? Typically when you are engaging third parties, you can basically budget. And here is an example variety of expenses. And let's say, this is one of the expense category called outside consultant, and you need to budget at the detail activity level, right? I can go and create an activity, and I can create an add new, and that will create an activity where I can specify for what drug this activity is, what is the drug type, and then you can basically go ahead and input your budget, right? Say, for example, I want to have this activity as 10K, and that needs to be done for nearly 6 months in my forecast. I'll just put that up and then submit that information. The system is going to roll that up for me in terms of that particular scenario, and perform your budget. Right. So similarly, you can actually set up your patient enrollment cost, and maybe you are in the middle of preparing your clinical study report for FDA submission, and that process could take 6 months period of time, and you need to budget for that, right? So all these cost components can be defined in the system to collect the budget, right? And similarly, let's take a look at research budget. And again, this is your expenditure category. This is your project. And maybe some projects you don't care about, who the vendor is, right? Then you can just budget without vendor information. Or there are some projects where you need to budget at the vendor level, then you can do that. So, right? At the end of the day, you basically collect all of that information, and then it becomes, this is your company budget. And so I can actually look at my different departments and then review my consolidated budget. Right? So this is more on the clinical trial cost, and then budgeting for your clinical research organization and other departments. Right? Now let's talk about FTE. And that's very important as well, because that's going to be one of the key components. And with Oracle Enterprise Solution, the planning budgeting solution, you have the workforce model that you can use to budget for your workforce, right? And here is an example of different assumptions associated with workforce. And you can define your promotion effective date and the promotion percentage. The system would then basically project your payroll related budget. And day one, you should be able to get your budget for your existing staff, right? Whether it is ADP or HR system, whatever the HR system is, you should be able to bring that information, and the system should get your budget on day one. And then you are only tweaking it by maybe promoting certain employees, or maybe transferring certain employees, right? Those are the actions you are doing. And imagine how much time you would be saving at the beginning of the budget cycle, and your iterations are going to be much faster. And that's how companies are able to save time. And here's an example of employee roster, right? Where you're going to bring in by each employee, and you can do it at the employee level or at the cost center level. And system will use all this information, and it will basically project it for you, right? And when you do that, you can get to your salary, 401k, and all the benefits. So let's just take, for example, one of these departments, and just going to go with this and see, right? So here's an example of all these employee. For each employee, all your payroll taxes, insurance, and benefits, and all of that, you can very easily budget, and then plan for your new hires as well, right? If you plan on hiring somebody for a specific project, you can very easily do that, right? So now let's talk about, we just touched on the workforce. By the way, if you have any specific requirement or anything that you want to see in detail, feel free to contact me or Camille to schedule a separate session, and we can get into some of the details that you want to talk about. And the idea here is to give you a survey of what our prepackaged content is and how Oracle Planning Budgeting Solution functionality can help you solve your planning budgeting related issues. Right? So let's continue here, and I'm going to show you quickly how you can do your revenue budget as well, which is basically going to be there here in your revenue budget screen. And you are looking at three different scenarios here, right? One is your FTE reimbursement, and the other one is the milestone-based revenue, which you saw in the clinical cost. And the other one is obviously some of the revenue associated with projects that you are probably executing for your partners, right? And then the other one is your sales, and other one is when you have your drug in the market, then you're going to have drivers like your average sales price and the number of units, which will then drive your revenue calculation. And all the gray cells tells you either they are read-only or they are calculated figures. And then all these white cells, as I input the information, the system is going to calculate and then get this done for you. So this is browser, right? And you can get the same thing from the Excel spreadsheet as well. And this is one of the template that you saw earlier. And I can go ahead and input my budget. For example, I can select all these cells, click on Smart View, and I can say adjust. And for example, I can increase this by another 20%, adjust data, and the color changes to indicate to you that you need to submit this information. And when I am submitting this information, that's when it is going to roll up. So as a department manager or a person who is best working on one project planning, as you work on your individual component and as you submit this, the system is going to aggregate your entire P&L and get that information rolled up to get to your overall P&L, right? P&L budget, right? So that's again an example of how you can set up driver-based planning for your revenue, for your clinical trial, and then segregate your different expenditure categories based on department as R&D, G&A, marketing and commercialization, and get your budget done, and then you can do your reporting efficiently, right? So with that, you see the color changes to normal yellow, which means the information is submitted and it is already aggregated across the board. And you see here at the top, working. So this is where, the planning system gives you the ability to define scenario planning, right? You can do your what if analysis on a particular budget scenario or a forecast scenario. And that's some of the things that are very inbuilt, right? For example, let's say, you want to copy one version to another version. You can actually very easily do that through a browser, saying, from which version you want to copy from and what scenario you want to copy from. So all of that can be very easily done in Excel spreadsheet. But keep in mind, when you do this, it is not happening in Excel, it is happening in the underlying repository, but you're initiating all these things by yourself. And so that's what makes it easier to maintain the application on a go-forward basis, right? So with that, I am actually going to go into the last piece and then open up for question. And that's basically your allocations, right? And allocations are going to be very important. And you might be doing both, the direct and indirect expenses allocation. And let me quickly just show you an expense allocation where, you can perform. So these are various templates, as you see here: revenue allocation, revenue budget, some of the things that we talked about. And so here is all the different categories. And what you can do is you can see here the project allocation. So let's just go ahead and open that. And so here you are looking at, each department allocating the expenses by project and by FTE, right? So let me just scroll down here. And so this is an example of a particular department expenses. And the FTEs involved in this department, they are working on 4 different projects. And their time distribution on each of this project, and this is where I was mentioning, you can get this information from your time tracking system, where how much time a particular employee is spending on a particular project. So you can basically burden the cost based on, burden the project with the cost based on the actual spend, right? And so this is an example of that. And now this particular total cost is basically allocated based on, so you can see here that I am taking this 18 million and I'm allocating to various projects based on the percentage that is already up here, right? So these kind of complex allocations you can define and perform both your direct allocation, as well as, when I say direct, I mean your rent expense based on maybe square footage, facilities expense, and then indirect allocations where you are basically taking the cost and allocating to various clinical trial project based on the actual time spent by the staff working on the project, right? So you can get to all of that very easily using the planning system. So in a nutshell, if I were to summarize all this, the planning budgeting environment is essentially a centralized repository allowing you to bring the actuals from a variety of ERP system on a scheduled basis, multiple times in a day. And then during your budget cycle, you can have your actuals displayed along with the next year budget. And that can be a multi-year or a rolling forecast. So you can input your budget, get that consolidated, and go through multiple iterations and get that board approved. And then when you do your month end, you're again using the same repository to do your month-end reporting, month-end analysis. So all of that happening through this single repository, which puts you in the driver's seat, meaning you're not spending time on gathering data. You're spending more time on analyzing the data. You're spending more time on quickly be able to gain that visibility and then take a decision on how you want to navigate through in a very disruptive market situation that we are in, right? I mean, in the past, it is new technology that will disrupt the market, but a pandemic-like situation can suddenly come in and alter this, and we need to have these resources aligned, and that's what I mean. I don't think there is a better, there cannot be more pressing situation than this for us to tighten our budget and be able to more precise in predicting our future by having this kind of applications in place. And that's what effectively a Oracle Planning Budgeting solution allows you to do with the help of the pre-built content. Right? So with that, I'm going to pause and see if there is any question, and I'll turn it back to Kamal.
Yeah, so just a reminder, if you have any questions, just go to that, the Zoom panel, and there's like a Q&A icon. Just click on that and you can submit it. So we have a couple questions right here. So real quick, does your system integrate with RD Logic for capturing FTE time on a project?
That's a great question, Camille. Yes, I mean, different. I've seen different life science customers using different time tracking system to capture the time information, and we will be able to integrate with that and automate through a file-based integration, automate that process of bringing in that information into the planning system, which is what effectively will be used for allocating different expenses by project. Right, so we can definitely do that.
Okay, and before I do this next one again, if you have any specific questions around our customer use cases, let us know. If we can't address them, we will invite them to our next presentation. That'd be a great opportunity to have another webinar with this group. So the next question is, you showed activity level planning. I assume you can do expense category level planning at a higher level?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so in fact, actually, you saw more detailed planning, right? There are certain expenditures where, you don't want to plan at the GL account level, right? And that's where you need a flexibility in terms of, being able to plan certain expenditure category at the purchase order level, which is the detailed. And then there are certain expenditure category, you don't want to even go to the GL account level. You want to do it at a higher level. So that's where the flexibility of the tool comes into play, where you can define expenditure category, or we call it as planning accounts, that can be defined in the system, so you can do this at a much higher level. For example, when you do your outside spend, you don't want to track by every single consultant. You want to say, I need 5 consultants, and be able to plan for that at that level. And then the travel, right? You don't want to go into things like meals, and you may have a GL account for your different travel expenses, but you just want to plan at one line saying, this is my total travel, right? And you can very easily do that by defining a very flexible model. So you can plan certain expenditure categories, the detail, and some of them at the higher level.
Okay, and the last one, and again, if you have any additional ones, please submit them real quick before we close out the call. But can I set targets for the sales teams while preparing a revenue plan?
Okay, I understand where this question is coming from. Certainly, when you are in the middle of preparing for getting the drug approved by FDA, and you are kind of laying out your manufacturing processes and the marketing processes in place. This is one of the key things, being able to define targets for your sales team. Not only for your sales team, for example, if you want to control your expenditure, you can say, hey, for this project, this is the expenditure, right? You cannot exceed this expense, and you can ask your department managers to use this as a guidelines and have them, input the budget bottom up. And you can use the system to define. I was talking to you about the version dimension, and the version allows you to collect the information as a target, or it allows you to collect the information as bottom up. So you would use that target version to set the target, and then have the department managers input the budget bottom up. So you can do that.
Great. I think that's it for questions. But again, if you have additional ones, you know where to find us. We'll follow up with an email so that you have Knoppen and I's full contact information. Just another quick reminder, again, in May, we're going to host a webinar, excuse me, sinuses, on creating these accurate and timely budgets for the improvement of manufacturing and so be on the lookout for that. But other than that, Knoppen, thanks for the presentation. And we'll see everybody in May.
Okay, thank you, Camille, and thank you everyone for your time.
Thank you. Have a great one. Bye-bye.
Bye.